Welcome back to the channel. This is the Action Figure Grader, and we're going to go over some of the items that sold last night over at Hakes. Hakes had an online exclusive 9-day auction for vintage Star Wars action figures. Kind of a collector session, usually lower grade stuff, more common stuff, but there were some gems in this auction. In general, I've just doing a casual search of everything that sold. Seems like prices were down, and there were some really good deals in this auction. For those of you that were bidding, I stayed away. I did some volunteer work last night. I'm going to start doing this more often, is scheduling volunteer work on the nights that Hakes auctions are ending. And that way, because I have to keep my phone off during those volunteer sessions, and it's a good way to not spend money, I'll tell you that. But there were some really good deals I felt in this auction. So I put together a random assortment, everything from early card backs all the way through the Power of the Force line, just to give you a sense of how the auctions were. Some of these went above fair market value, and I wanted to kind of show that. But for the most part, I thought that there were some good deals here. All right, so let's take a look. We got a 12-back B Stormtrooper AFA 80, 85, 80 were the sub scores. This was a punched example. That one sold for $10.70, right at the very bottom of the value code estimate from Hakes. And I'll mention that occasionally, but basically that's Hakes' estimate of where they think it's going to end. It's usually a pretty wide range for early card backs because you just never know who's going to be bidding. But $1,070 for a 12-back B Stormtrooper. It was punched, no price sticker, but clear blister in very good shape, every bit of an 80 grade, and that was a good deal. All of these prices include the buyer's premium of 18%. Keep in mind that if you pay by wire or by check, that buyer's premium gets dropped to 15%. And at least for me, I didn't have to pay state sales tax. I think if you live in Pennsylvania, you do, but you know, their shipping costs are fairly reasonable, and they're usually pretty quick to ship. But anyway, I thought that was a great deal. Here's one that went on the other end of the spectrum. I was really kind of perplexed as to why this one went so high. This is a 12-back C Death Squad Commander graded AFA 80, 85, 85 were the sub scores. It was a punched example as well, and it sold for $14.27, which this is a very common 12C. The 12C Death Squad Commander, you can find this almost every month on eBay and in this grade, if not higher. And $14.27 is a lot. I mean, that's way higher than I was expecting for this. You know, we've seen some examples go even below $1,000 on eBay for a 12-back C. And this value code was right on the money. You know, they had a value code of $700 to $1,000. That's exactly where I would have estimated it to go. And it went for, you know, 40% above the upper value code. So I don't know why it went so high. Maybe just you got into a bidding war there, but that one definitely went higher than I expected. Here was a 20-back C Princess Leia, and this was only an AFA 70. So the card 70, it did have 280 subscores for the blister and the figure. But the value code on this, again, I think was right in line with what the estimates were in my mind, 1,000 to 1,200 or 2,000, 1,000 to 2,000. I was expecting kind of at the top end, maybe $1,500 because it was only an AFA 70, and it went for $4,032. So this is another one where I have no idea why it sold for what it did. Again, I don't know if maybe the 20-back C in particular is a low population item, so that could have played a factor there, but that is a very strange final score. And maybe while you're leaving me a like for this video, you can comment with those of you that are experts on some of these early card backs. Maybe the 20-back C in particular is a very rare item. To me, I don't see anything rare about it, but that's what it sold for, $4,032. So there were some other good deals, though. This was a CAS 85 Plus sealed, factory sealed collector series dewback. The value code of 400 to 700, again, right in line with estimates. I would think even towards the upper end of that number. And that one sold for $533. So that was a bargain of a deal there. There were a lot of loose graded figures that I thought were good candidates to buy and get recased with the new archival AFA case. This was an R2-D2, just a standard R2-D2 Hong Kong. And, maybe it's just the lighting, but it does look like the dark blue dome to me as well. Maybe it's just the lighting, though. But it was an AFA 85 old case style. It sold for $240 after the buyer's premium. I mean, that is a shockingly low number and a great candidate to buy and get recased with an archival case, and you got some built-in equity there. We just talked, I just filmed a video that hasn't released yet on an AFA 85 that sold for about double that price, almost $500. So that was a really good deal there. This is one where, I thought there was a little high. This one was an old case style Spanish PBP Darth Vader, UKG 85%, value code of 100 to 200. I thought was a little low. I was thinking like 250. It sold for 354. So, again, this is one where I'm like, that's a little high to me, but it's not terribly high. But I think that you can find this all day long for less on eBay. So, very strange sale. This was kind of a unique item. This is one that I showed in the preview video. This is where the factory error had the eyes and the eyebrows off center, and so it was just a factory error misprint for the eyes and the eyebrows. I think it's a really cool item. It was graded UKG 85%, factory error eyes misaligned, and that one, the value code of 100 to 200, I thought was a little low. I was thinking it would certainly go above that, and it did sell for 354. Which I think that price is a price I'd be willing to pay if I was into factory errors. So one of y'all, I think it was Scott H, he asked me, he's like, how could it get an 85% if it had this factory error? Well, it's kind of like with comic books where if it's got a factory print error, where maybe the colors are wrong or something like that, but the condition is actually in mint condition, then it should get the 85, in my opinion. It's, you shouldn't ding the figure because the printing was misaligned. You would just note it on the label, in my opinion. This is all my opinion. If it's truly, the rest of the figure is in 85 grade condition, which I would argue it probably is, you can always make that, the discussion of UKG versus AFA versus CAS grading, we all know that there's some grading differences, but for UKG in, particular, I think this is every bit of an 85 grade. It just happens to have a factory error, and I wouldn't personally ding this because of that factory error. I would just note it on the label. AFA does do that, though. In all fairness to Scott's comment in the preview video, if you got an unpainted torso or something like that and you send it to AFA, they give it automatically a 75. Which I don't think is right, in my opinion. I don't think that's fair. If it's just an unpainted torso or something like that, why should it get a 75 just because it missed the paint in the factory? That's a factory error that should be graded accordingly and just noted on the label. But that's how AFA does it. So I understand your point. Next up was a 31B Leia Organa. This one did have the green discoloration to the neck that you can see right there. It's still got the AFA 80. I don't know if that green happened after grading. I would argue it probably did. The value code of 700 to 1,000, it sold at 811. I think that's probably okay. It's higher than I'd pay. To me, if I'm going to spend $800 on an AFA 80 punched example, especially for Leia, we've seen them for less on eBay, $700, $600 sometimes. So to me, that's more than I'd pay. But, if you're looking for that particular green neck, which is kind of a known, it's got kind of a reputation, right? And if you don't have one and you got like a standard 31B that's in high grade and you wanted the green neck just to have it, then I get it. But I don't think it's a terrible overpay, but it's certainly more than I would have paid. Next up, this is surprising on the upper end of the scale. This was a 41 back A clear, yellowed blister. Excuse me. This was a yellowed blister 41 back A Dengar. So 80 plus grade from CAS. And it was yellowed, and it still sold for $713. So, this is one where the value code of 700 to 1,000, I would have guessed would have been too high, given that it was a yellowed blister. But they were right. They were right that it did sell at $713.90. I was expecting like 400 to 450, to be honest with you. Maybe 500 to 550. I actually had a 41E Dengar that was labeled clear blister, but when I sold it, I said, hey, in my opinion, this is starting to yellow just a little bit. And I think I sold it at $550, which I thought at the time was fair. And that was a year and a half ago when the market was maybe a little stronger. So I don't feel bad now after selling that one for $550, given that this one sold at $713. That's a really strong price point there. This was, I thought, a really good deal. And you can argue that the label is no longer valid on this because the figure score of 85 on this 41 back D Boba Fett is no longer applicable. It has very obvious discoloration to the limbs and to one leg. You can see how one leg is lighter than the other leg, and that both limbs have also started to degrade, which we talk about all the time on the channel. Boba Fett's on ESB card backs, they do tend to do that, especially in that range, like that 41 back, 48 back, 47 back. So you could argue that it's a 75 sub-score for the figure, but it still has a card score of 85 and a blister score of 80. I still think it's an 80 grade overall. The value code was 2,000 to 5,000, which is a wide range. 32.45 to me is a very good deal. That's a price I'd pay. Some of you may not. You may just disagree with that sentiment, but to me, for a really nice clear blister ESB card back for Boba Fett at 32.45, AFA 80. Again, is the label 100% still valid? No. Would it bother me to have that in my collection? Absolutely not, especially at that price. I think that's a very fair price. Next up was another good deal. This one was an AFA 80 vinyl carrying case. Nothing particularly rare here. This is an item we see pretty regularly on the channel in my eBay updates. That one sold for $486 after the buyer's premium. Great deal. This was, to me, I would have guessed $600 to $650. $486 was a very good deal. Very, very good deal. Next up, some tri-logos that sold for super cheap. This was an AFA 80 FX7 clear blister. It did have a card subscore of 75. We talk about that all the time in terms of Hake's bidding strategy, that it seems like people that bid on Hakes try to avoid either punched examples when unpunched examples are preferred, or when one of the subscores has a 75 subscore. And they try to keep it all 80s and 85s and 90s for the subscores. So this is one that would have certainly been on my target range if I had been shopping. But I do know that one of my Patreon supporters was after this. I hope he was able to get this because it sold for $300.90. I thought that was a great deal for a Tri-Logo FX7. Likewise, the Nikto was an AFA 80. That one sold at $292, a very fair price there. That's a price I'd pay in a heartbeat. That was an unpunched example as well. 85, 80, 85 for the subscores. Great deal there. And then the Barada had a Clipper catalog offer on the back. That was an AFA 80, and that one sold for $520. I thought that was a very fair price. I think I paid about that for mine after grading cost, and mine only got a 75 plus. I have a Clipper catalog CAS 75 plus. And once I factor in grading costs and everything, that's about the same price I paid for, if not even slightly above that, factoring in shipping to and from CAS. So that was a great deal there for an unpunched example as well. Next up was a clear blister 65 back C Leia Bouche. It still looks pretty clear to me. I mean, you could maybe say that it's got some very light yellowing, but I don't think so. I think that one's still a clear blister. And I think it was either the last Hakes auction or the one before that had an AFA 80 or 85 clear blister that sold for $2,800. Well, this one's an AFA 75 clear blister, and that one sold for $336. Great deal. Really good deal there. I've seen ungraded examples sell for $600 plus on Facebook. So to get one already graded, unpunched, and a clear blister for $336, that was a good deal if you can live with a 75 grade. Very good deal there. Next up, Jabba the Hutt Dungeon playset, action playset. I told you I'm kind of all over the place here. I didn't include everything. There was a ton that sold, but I just wanted to show some of the highlights. The value code on this AFA 80 example, now this one did have the last 17 figures, which is why it sold so high. So this one included the baggies for Barada, Amanamana, and EV99, and it sold for $2,000. That's exactly the number I would have guessed it would have sold at. $1,000, way too low for the low end of the value code, but at $2,000 all day long. I've seen them sell for $2,000 to $2,200 all day long in an AFA 80. This EV99 was a bargain. It was labeled a clear blister. I don't know why it sold so cheap. I really don't. I mean, you could say, okay, maybe there's some yellowing there, but I don't see it. I don't see it. This is an unpunched AFA 80 Power of the Force EV99 and clear blister on the label, and it looks clear blister. Now, even if it's slightly yellowing, at $454, that is a steal, an absolute steal of a deal. It says inner blister tray shows moderate aging. Okay, so fine. The inner blister tray is yellowing. So what? So what? What an awesome deal. $454. I mean, that was highway robbery. Highway robbery. That is a great deal, whoever got that. And then we had a yellowed Power of the Force Barada AFA 80 for $321. Another very fair deal. Unpunched, no price sticker. I mean, it was yellowed, but so what? You know, if you're into Power of the Force, you have to, if you collect the Power of the Force line in high grade, you have to live with yellowing. I mean, it's nearly impossible to find these with a clear blister. And $321 is a great deal. Really good deal there. What else do we have here? We also had some other loose graded I wanted to show you. This was another good candidate to send in to get recased with AFA. This is their earliest case that didn't even have the dowels around the neck. And an AFA 85 Luke Battle Poncho last 17. It sold for $157. Wow, what a great deal. Now, you are taking some grading risk that it won't get the 85 when you send it in to AFA to get recased. But this is a prime candidate to send in, even if you get it and it comes back an AFA 80 plus or an AFA 80. Who cares? You spent total maybe $200 on it. And, you know, at 157, that's a really good deal there. Two different Luke Stormtroopers sold. First was a UKG 85% with the coin. That one sold for $713. Very good deal there. And there was also an AFA 80 old case style that sold for $389. I mean, that's ungraded prices, if not below ungraded prices on eBay. Great deal there. So there were some good deals to be had. This was another very fair deal. This was a, a pop-up lightsaber R2-D2 with the coin, graded UKG 85% for $649. I mean, we see loose, complete R2-D2 pop-ups ungraded for $650 all day long. I just made a video recently where one sold for that price. So $649 was below the value code of $700 to $1,000. I would have guessed this would have sold closer to $1,000 all day long. So another good deal. Some other off-the-wall items and kind of customs. This was a Give a Show Discovery Time Return of the Jedi Wicket, the Ewok kind of slide projector. And that's the first time I've ever even seen this. I've seen it for the Star Wars, original movie, but I had never seen this one. This one was graded AFA 80 plus, and it sold for $224. That's a really good deal there. And then some customs that sold for the mini rigs. Here was that Desert Sail Skiff along with a Taiwan Boba Fett UKG 85% for both items. That one sold for $520. And then here was the Catapult with the Ewok graded UKG 85%. That one also sold for $520. Both of those were above the value code of $200 to $400. A little surprised that the Ewok Catapult and Chief Chirpa sold for that much. I can kind of see it for this one because it's a harder to find mini rig and it's the Taiwan Boba Fett. So that one, I could kind of see that one going for $520. But the Ewok Catapult, I was a little surprised that one went so high. Anyway, that gives you a kind of a general idea of this auction. There were some that did go obviously above what I consider to be the upper end of the fair market value, but there were a lot of good deals that I didn't even cover. Lots of loose graded and baggies and things like that for the most part sold for well below fair market value. So I hope that some of you were able to pick up some items. Again, please leave me a like if you enjoyed this video. Thank you as always for watching, and I'll be back soon.